loose white trousers, and a black skull cap. He had whitened his face with flour, and he made hideous noises with a trumpet. On the roof of the coach were assembled Polichinelle, Scaramouche, Harlequin, and Pasquariel. Polichinelle in black and white, his doublet cut in the fashion of a century ago, with humps before and behind, a white frill round his neck, and a black mass upon the upper half of his face, stood in the middle, his feet planted wide to steady him, solemnly and viciously banging a big drum. The other three were seated each at one of the corners of the roof, their legs dangling over. Scaramouche, all in black in the Spanish fashion of the 17th century, his face adorned with a pair of mustachios, jangled a guitar discordantly. Harlequin, ragged and patched in every color of the rainbow, with his leather girdle and sore laugh, the upper half of his face smeared in soot, clashed a pair of cymbals intermittently. Pasquariel, as an apothecary in skull cap and white apron, excited the hilarity of the onlookers by his enormous tin clister, which emitted when pumped a dolorous squeak within the chaise itself, but showing themselves freely at the windows and exchanging quips with the townsfolk, sat the three ladies of the company. Clymene, the amoureuse, beautifully gowned in flowered satin, her own clustering ringlets concealed under a pumpkin-shaped wig, looked so much the lady of fashion that you might have wondered what she was doing in that fantastic rabble. Madame, as the mother, was also dressed with splendor, but exaggerated to achieve the ridiculous. Her headdress was a monstrous structure adorned with flowers and superimposed by little ostrich plumes. Columbine sat facing them, her back to the horses, falsely demure, in milkmaid bonnet of white muslin and a striped gown of green and blue. The marvel was that the old chaise, which in halcyon days may have served to carry some dignitary of the church, did not founder instead of merely groaning under that excessive and ribald load. Next came the house on wheels, led by the long, lean Rhodomont, who had daubed his face red and increased the terror of it by a pair of formidable mustachios. He was in long thigh boots and leather jerkin, trailing an enormous sword from a crimson baldric. He wore a broad felt hat with draggled feather, and as he advanced, he raised his great voice and roared out defiance and threats of blood-curdling butchery, to be performed upon all and sundry. On the roof of this vehicle sat Leandre alone. He was in blue satin, with ruffles, small sword, powdered hair, patches and spyglass, and red-heeled shoes. The complete courtier, looking very handsome. The women of Guachin ogled him coquettishly. He took the ogling as a proper tribute to his personal endowments, and returned it with interest. Like Clymene, he looked out of place amid the bandits who composed the remainder of the company. Bringing up the rear came André-Louis, leading the two donkeys that dragged the property cart. He had insisted upon assuming a false nose, representing as for embellishment that which he intended for disguise. For the rest, he had retained his own garments. No one paid any attention to him as he trudged along beside his donkeys, an insignificant rear guard, which he was well content to be. They made the tour of the town, in which the activity was already above the normal in preparation for next week's fair. At intervals they halted. The cacophony would cease abruptly, and Polichinelle would announce in a stentorian voice that 5 o'clock that evening in the old market, M., Benet's famous company of improvisers, will perform a new comedy in 4 acts entitled The Heartless Father. Thus at last they came to the old market, which was the ground floor of the town hall, and open to the 4 winds by 2 archways on each side of its length, and 1 archway on each side of its breadth. These archways, with 2 exceptions, had been boarded up. Through those 2, which gave admission to what presently would be the theater, the ragamuffins of the town, and the niggards who were reluctant to spend the necessary sou to obtain proper admission, might catch furtive glimpses of performance. That afternoon was the most strenuous of André-Louis' life. Unaccustomed as he was to any sort of manual labor, it was spent in erecting and preparing the stage at one end of the market hall, and he began to realize how hard-earned were to be his monthly 15 livres. At first there were 4 of them to the task, or really 3, for Pantaloon did no more than ball directions. Stripped of their finery, Rhodomont and Leandre assisted André-Louis in that carpentering. Meanwhile, the other 4 were at dinner with the ladies. When a half hour or so later they came to carry on the work, André-Louis and his companions went to dine in their turn, leaving Polichinelle to direct the operations as well as assist in them. They crossed the square to the cheap little, in where they had taken up their quarters. In the narrow passage, André-Louis came face to face with Clymene, her fine feathers cast, and restored by now to her normal appearance. "And how do you like it?" she asked him, pertly. He looked her in the eyes. "It has its compensations," quoth he, in that curious cold tone of his that left one wondering whether he meant or not what he seemed to mean. She knit her brows. You feel the need of compensations already?" "Faith, I felt it from the beginning," said he. "It was a perception of them allured me." They were quite alone, the others having gone on into the room set apart for them, where food was spread. André-Louis, who was as unlearned in woman as he was learned in man, was not to know, upon feeling himself suddenly extraordinarily aware of her femininity, that it was she who in some subtle, imperceptible manner so rendered him. "What," she asked him with demurest innocence, "are these compensations?" He caught himself upon the brink of the abyss. 15 livres a month," said he, abruptly. A moment she stared at him bewildered. He was very disconcerting. Then she recovered. "Oh, and bed and board," said she. "Don't be leaving that from the reckoning, as you seem to be doing, for your dinner will be going cold. Aren't you coming?" "Haven't you dined?" he cried, and she wondered that she caught a note of eagerness. "No," she answered, over her shoulder. "I waited." "What for?" quoth his innocence, hopefully. "I had to change, of course." "Zany," she answered rudely. Having dragged him, as she imagined, to the chopping block, she could not refrain from chopping. But then he was of those who must be chopping back. "And you left your manners upstairs with your grand lady clothes, mademoiselle. I understand." A scarlet flame suffused her face. "You are very insolent," she said lamely. "I've often been told so, but I don't believe it." He thrust open the door for her, and bowed with an air which imposed upon her, although it was merely copied from Fleury of the Comédie Française, so often visited in the Louis le Grand days. He waved her in. "After you, mademoiselle." For greater emphasis, he deliberately broke the word into its two component parts. "I thank you, monsieur," she answered frostily, as near sneering as was possible to so charming a person, and went in, nor addressed him again throughout the meal. Instead, she devoted herself with an unusual and devastating assiduity to this aspiring Leandre, that poor devil who could not successfully play the lover with her on the stage because of his longing to play it in reality. André-Louis ate his herrings and black bread with a good appetite nevertheless. It was poor fare, but then poor fare was a common lot of poor people in that winter of starvation, and since he had cast in his fortunes with a company whose affairs were not flourishing, he must accept the evils of the situation philosophically. "Have you a name?" Binet asked him once in the course of that repast, and during a pause in the conversation. "It happens that I have," said he. "I think it is Parvissimus." "Parvissimus," quoth Binet. "Is that a family name?" "In such a company, where only the leader enjoys the privilege of a family name, the like would be unbecoming its least member. So I take the name that best becomes in me, and I think it is Parvissimus, the very least." Binet was amused. It was droll. It showed a ready fancy. "Oh, to be sure, they must get to work together on those scenarios. I shall prefer it to carpentering," said André-Louis. Nevertheless, he had to go back to it that afternoon, and to labor strenuously until 4 o'clock, when at last the autocratic Binet announced himself satisfied with the preparations, and proceeded, again with the help of André-Louis, to prepare the lights, which were supplied partly by tallow candles and partly by lamps burning fish oil. At 5 o'clock that evening the 3 knocks were sounded, and the curtain rose on the heartless father. Among the duties inherited by André-Louis from the departed Felician whom he replaced was that of doorkeeper. This duty he discharged dressed in a Polichinelle costume and wearing a pasteboard nose. It was an arrangement mutually agreeable to M., Binet, and himself. M. Binet, who had taken the further precaution of retaining André-Louis' own garments, was thereby protected against the risk of his latest recruit absconding with the takings. André-Louis, without illusions on the score of Pantaloon's real object, agreed to it willingly enough, since it protected him from the chance of recognition by any acquaintance who might possibly be in Guechin. The performance was in every sense unexciting, the audience meager and unenthusiastic. The benches provided in the front half of the market contained some 27 persons, 11 at 20 sous a head and 16 at 12. Behind these stood a rabble of some 30 others at 6 sous apiece. Thus the gross takings were 2 louis, 10 livres, and 2 sous. By the time Benet had paid for the use of the market, his lights, and the expenses of his company at the inn over Sunday, there was not likely to be very much left towards the wages of his players. It is not surprising, therefore, that Benet's bonhomie should have been a trifle overcast that evening. "And what do you think of it?" he asked André-Louis, as they were walking back to the inn after performance. "Possibly it could have been worse. Probably it could not," said he. In sheer amazement, Benet checked in his stride and turned to look at his companion. "Ah," said he, "Dieu de Dieu, but you are frank. An unpopular form of service among fools, I know." "Well, I am not a fool," said Benet. "That is why I am frank. I pay you the compliment of assuming intelligence in you, Benet." "Oh, you do," quoth Benet. "And who the devil are you to assume anything? Your assumptions are presumptuous, sir." And with that he lapsed into silence and the gloomy business of mentally casting up his accounts. But at table over supper a half-hour later, he revived the topic. "Our latest recruit, this excellent Parvissimus," he announced, "has the impudence to tell me that possibly our comedy could have been worse, but that probably it could not." And he blew out his great round cheeks to invite a laugh at the expense of that foolish critic. "That's bad," said the swarthy and sardonic Polichinelle. He was grave as Rhadamanthus pronouncing judgment. "That's bad. But what is infinitely worse is that the audience had the impudence to be of the same mind." "An ignorant pack of clods," sneered Leandre, with a toss of his handsome head. "You are wrong," quoth Harlequin. "You were born for love, my dear, not criticism." Leandre, a dull dog, as you have conceived, looked contemptuously down upon the little man. "And you, what were you born for?" he wondered. "Nobody knows," was a candid admission, "nor yet why. It is the case of many of us, my dear, believe me. But why, Benet took him up, and thus spoilt the beginnings of a very pretty quarrel. "Why do you say that Leandre is wrong?" "To be general, because he is always wrong. To be particular, because I judge the audience of Goetia to be too sophisticated for the heartless father." "You would put it more happily," interposed André-Louis, who was the cause of this discussion, "if you said that the heartless father is too unsophisticated for the audience of Goetia." "Why, what's the difference?" asked Leandre. "I didn't imply a difference. I merely suggested that it is a happier way to express the fact." "The gentleman is being subtle," sneered Benet. "Why happier?" Harlequin demanded. "Because it is easier to bring the heartless father to the sophistication of the Goetian audience than the Goetian audience to the unsophistication of the heartless father." "Let me think it out," groaned Polichinelle, and he took his head in his hands. But from the tail of the table André-Louis was challenged by Clymene, who sat there between Columbine and Madame. "You would alter the comedy, would you, Parvissimus?" she cried. He turned to parry her malice. "I would suggest that it be altered," he corrected, inclining his head. "And how would you alter it, monsieur?" "Oh, for the better. But of course." She was sleek as sarcasm. "And how would you do it?" "Tell us that," roared Benet, and added, "Silence, I pray you, gentlemen and ladies." Silence for Parvissimus. André-Louis looked from father to daughter and smiled. "Party," said he. "I am between bludgeon and dagger. If I escape with my life, I shall be fortunate. Why, then, since you pin me to the very wall, I'll tell you what I should do. I should go back to the original and help myself more freely from it." "The original?" questioned Benet. "The author. It is called, I believe, Monsieur de Pourceaugnac, and was written by Molière." Somebody tittered, but that somebody was not Benet. He had been touched on the raw, and the look in his little eyes betrayed the fact that his bonhomme exterior covered anything but a bonhomme. "You charge me with plagiarism," he said at last, "with filching the ideas of Molière." "There is always, of course," said André-Louis, unruffled, "the alternative possibility of two great minds working upon parallel lines." Benet studied the young man attentively a moment. He found him bland and inscrutable, and decided to pin him down. "Then you do not imply that I have been stealing from Molière?" "I advise you to do so, monsieur," was the disconcerting reply. Benet was shocked. "You advise me to do so? You advise me, Antoine Benet, to turn thief at my age? He is outrageous, said Mademoiselle, indignantly. Outrageous is the word. I thank you for it, my dear. I take you on trust, sir. You sit at my table. You have the honor to be included in my company. And to my face you have the audacity to advise me to become a thief. The worst kind of thief that is conceivable, a thief of spiritual things, a thief of ideas. It is insufferable, intolerable. I have been, I fear, deeply mistaken in you, monsieur, just as you appear to have been mistaken in me. I am not the scoundrel you suppose me, sir, and I will not number my company a man who dares to suggest that I should become one. Outrageous! He was very angry. His voice boomed to the little room, and the company sat hushed and something scared, their eyes upon André-Louis, who was the only one entirely unmoved by this outburst of virtuous indignation. You realize, monsieur, he said very quietly, that you are insulting the memory of the illustrious dead? Eh, Sabatini. André-Louis developed his sophistries. You insult the memory of Molière, the greatest ornament of our stage, one of the greatest ornaments of our nation, when you suggest that there is vileness in doing that which he never hesitated to do, which no great author yet has hesitated to do. You cannot suppose that Molière ever troubled himself to be original in the matter of ideas. You cannot suppose that the stories he tells in his plays have never been told before. They were culled, as you very well know, though you seem momentarily to have forgotten it. And it is therefore necessary that I should remind you. They were culled, many of them, from the Italian authors, who themselves had culled them heaven alone knows where. Molière took those old stories and retold them in his own language. That is precisely what I am suggesting that you should do. Your company is a company of improvisers. You supply the dialogue as you proceed, which is rather more than Molière ever attempted. You may, if you prefer it, though it would seem to me to be yielding to an excess of scruple, go straight to Boccaccio or Sacchetti. But even then you cannot be sure that you have reached the sources. André-Louis came off with flying colors after that. You see what a debater was lost in him, how nimble he was in the art of making white look black. The company was impressed, and no one more than M. Binet, who found himself supplied with a crushing argument against those who in future might tax him with the impudent plagiarisms which he undoubtedly perpetrated. He retired in the best order he could from the position he had taken up at the outset. So that you think, he said at the end of a long outburst of agreement, you think that our story of the heartless father could be enriched by dipping into Monsieur de Pourceaugnac, to which I confess upon reflection that it may present certain superficial resemblances? I do. Most certainly I do, always provided that you do so judiciously. Times have changed since Molière. It was as a consequence of this that Binet retired soon after, taking André-Louis with him. The pair sat together late that night, and were again in close communion throughout the whole of Sunday morning. After dinner, Binet read to the assembled company the amended and amplified Canevas of the Heartless Father, which, acting upon the advice of M. Parvissimus, he had been at great pains to prepare. The company had few doubts as to the real authorship before he began to read. None at all when he had read. There was a verve, a grip about this story. And what was more, those of them who knew their Molière realized that far from approaching the original more closely, this Canevas had drawn farther away from it. Molière's original part, the title role, had dwindled into insignificance, to the great disgust of Polichinelle, to whom it fell. But the other parts had all been built up into importance, with the exception of Leandre, who remained as before. The two great roles were now Scaramouche, in the character of the intriguing Sprigandini, and Pantaloon the father. There was, too, a comical part for Rhodomont, as a roaring bully hired by Polichinelle to cut Leandre into ribbons. And in view of the importance now of Scaramouche, the play had been rechristened Figaro's Scaramouche. This last had not been without a deal of opposition from M. Binet, but his relentless collaborator, who was in reality the real author, drawing shamelessly, but practically at last upon his great store of reading, had overborne him. You must move with the times, monsieur. In Paris Beaumarchais is the rage. Figaro is known today throughout the world. Let us borrow a little of his glory. It will draw the people in. They will come to see half of Figaro, when they will not come to see a dozen heartless fathers. Therefore let us cast the mantle of Figaro upon someone, and proclaim it in our title. But as I am the head of the company, began him Benet weakly. If you will be blind to your interests, you will presently be a head without a body. And what use is that? Can the shoulders of Pantaloon carry the mantle of Figaro? You laugh. Of course you laugh. The notion is absurd. The proper person for the mantle of Figaro is Scaramouche, who is naturally Figaro's twin brother. Thus tyrannized, the tyrant Benet gave way, comforted by the reflection that if he understood anything at all about the theater, he had for 15 livres a month acquired something that would presently be earning him as many louis. The company's reception of the Canevas now confirmed him, if we accept Polichinelle, who, annoyed at having lost half his part in the alterations, declared the new scenario fatuous. Ah, you call my work fatuous, do you? Benet hectored him. Your work? Said Polichinelle, to add with his tongue in his cheek. Ah, pardon. I had not realized that you were the author. Then realize it now. You were very close with Parvissimus over this authorship, said Polichinelle, with impudent suggestiveness. And what if I was? What do you imply? That you took him to cut quills for you, of course. I'll cut your ears for you if you're not civil, stormed the infuriated Benet. Polichinelle got up slowly and stretched himself. Jew to Jew, said he. If Pantaloon is to play Rhodomont, I think I'll leave you. He is not amusing in the part. And he swaggered out before him. Benet had recovered from his speechlessness. Chapter 4. Exit Monsieur Parvissimus. AR 4 o'clock on Monday afternoon, the curtain rose on Figaro's Scaramouche. To an audience that filled 3/4 of the market hall. Benet attributed this good attendance to the influx of people to Guechan for the fair, and to the magnificent parade of his company through the streets of the township at the busiest time of the day. André-Louis attributed it entirely to the title. It was a Figaro touch that had fetched in the better class bourgeoisie, which filled more than half of the 20-sou places and 3/4 of the 12-sou seats. The lure had drawn them. Whether it was to continue to do so would depend upon the manner in which the Canevas, over which he had labored to the glory of Benet, was interpreted by the company. Of the merits of the Canevas itself, he had no doubt. The authors upon whom he had drawn for the elements of it were sound, and he had taken of their best, which he claimed to be no more than the justice due to them. The company excelled itself. The audience followed with relish the sly intriguings of Scaramouche, delighted in the beauty and freshness of Clymene, was moved almost to tears by the hard fate which through 4 long acts kept her from the hungering arms of the so beautiful Leandre, howled its delight over the ignominy of Pantaloon, the buffooneries of his sprightly lackey Harlequin, and the phrasonical strut and bellowing fierceness of the cowardly Rhodomont. The success of the Benet troupe in Guechan was assured. That night the company drank Burgundy at Benet's expense. The takings reached the sum of 8 louis, which was as good business as Benet had ever done in all his career. He was very pleased. Gratification rose like steam from his fat body. He even condescended so far as to attribute a share of the credit for success to Parvissimus. His suggestion, he was careful to say, by way of properly delimiting that share, was most valuable as I perceived at the time. And his cutting of quills, growled Polichinelle. Don't forget that. It is most important to have by you a man who understands how to cut a quill, as I shall remember when I turn author. But not even that jibe could stir Benet out of his lethargy of content. On Tuesday, the success was repeated artistically and augmented financially. 10 louis and 7 livres was the enormous sum that André-Louis, the doorkeeper, counted over to Benet after the performance. Never yet had Benet made so much money in one evening, and a miserable little village like Guechan was certainly the last place in which you would have expected this windfall. Ah, but Guechan in time of fair, André-Louis reminded him. There are people here from as far as Nantes and Rennes to buy and sell. Tomorrow, being the last day of the fair, the crowds will be greater than ever. We should better this evening's receipts. Better them? I shall be quite satisfied if we do as well, my friend. You can depend upon that, André-Louis assured him. Are we to have Burgundy? And then the tragedy occurred. It announced itself in a succession of bumps and thuds, culminating in a crash outside the door that brought them all to their feet in alarm. Pierrot sprang to open and beheld the tumbled body of a man lying at the foot of the stairs. It emitted groans, therefore it was alive. Pierrot went forward to turn it over and disclosed the fact that the body wore the wizened face of Scaramouche, a grimacing, groaning, twitching Scaramouche. The whole company, pressing after Pierrot, abandoned itself to laughter. "I always said you should change parts with me," cried Harlequin. "You're such an excellent tumbler. Have you been practicing?" "Fool!" Scaramouche snapped. "Must you be laughing when I've all but broken my neck?" "You are right. We ought to be weeping because you didn't break it. Come, man, get up." And he held out a hand to the prostrate rogue. Scaramouche took the hand, clutched it, heaved himself on the ground, then with a scream dropped back again. "My foot," he complained. Benet rolled to the group of players, scattering them to right and left. Apprehension had been quick to seize him. Fate had played him such tricks before. "What ails your foot?" quoth he sourly. "It's broken, I think," Scaramouche complained. "Broken? Bah! Get up, man." He caught him under the armpits and hauled him up. Scaramouche came howling to one foot. The other doubled under him when he attempted to set it down, and he must have collapsed again, but that Benet supported him. He filled the place with his plaint, whilst Benet swore amazingly and variedly. "Must you bellow like a calf, you fool? Be quiet. A chair here, someone." A chair was thrust forward. He crushed Scaramouche down into it. "Let us look at this foot of yours." Heedless of Scaramouche's howls of pain, he swept away shoe and stocking. "What ails it?" he asked, staring. "Nothing that I can see." He seized it, heel in one hand, instep in the other, and gyrated it. Scaramouche screamed in agony until Clymene caught Benet's arm and made him stop. "My God, have you no feelings?" she reproved her father. "The lad has hurt his foot. Must you torture him? Will that cure it?" "Hurt his foot," said Benet. "I can see nothing the matter with his foot. Nothing to justify all this uproar. He has bruised it, maybe." "A man with a bruised foot doesn't scream like that," said Madame over Clymene's shoulder. "Perhaps he has dislocated it." "That is what I fear," whimpered Scaramouche. Benet heaved himself up in disgust. Take him to bed, he bade them, and fetch a doctor to see him. It was done, and the doctor came. Having seen the patient, he reported that nothing very serious had happened, but that in falling he had evidently sprained his foot a little. A few days' rest, and all would be well. "A few days," cried Benet. "God of God, do you mean that he can't walk?" "It would be unwise, indeed impossible for more than a few steps." Benet paid the doctor's fee and sat down to think. He filled himself a glass of Burgundy, tossed it off without a word, and sat thereafter staring into the empty glass. "It is, of course, the sort of thing that must always be happening to me," he grumbled to no one in particular. The members of the company were all standing in silence before him, sharing his dismay. "I might have known that this, or something like it, would occur to spoil the first vein of luck that I have found in years. Ah, well, it is finished. Tomorrow we pack and depart. The best day of the fair, on the crescent wave of our success, a good 15 louis to be taken, and this happens. God of God, do you mean to abandon tomorrow's performance?" All turned to stare with Benet at André-Louis. "Are we to play Figaro Scaramouche without Scaramouche?" asked Benet, sneering. "Of course not." André-Louis came forward. "But surely some rearrangement of the parts is possible. For instance, there's a fine actor in Polichinelle." Polichinelle swept him a bow. "Overwhelmed," said he, ever sardonic. "But he has a part of his own," objected Benet. "A small part which Pasquario could play." "And who will play Pasquario?" "Nobody. We delete it. The play need not suffer." "He thinks of everything," sneered Polichinelle. "What a man!" But Benet was far from agreement. "Are you suggesting that Polichinelle should play Scaramouche?" he asked, incredulously. "Why not? He is able enough." "Overwhelmed again," interjected Polichinelle. "Play Scaramouche with that figure?" Benet heaved himself up to point a denunciating finger at Polichinelle's sturdy, thick-set shortness. "For lack of a better," said André-Louis. Overwhelmed more than ever, Polichinelle's bow was superb this time. "Faith, I think I'll take the air to cool me after so much blushing." "Go to the devil." Benet flung at him, better and better. Polichinelle made for the door. On the threshold, he halted and struck an attitude. Understand me, Benet. I do not now play Scaramouche in any circumstances whatever. And he went out. On the whole, it was a very dignified exit. André-Louis shrugged, threw out his arms, and let them fall to his sides again. You have ruined everything, he told him. Benet, the matter could easily have been arranged. Well, it is you are master here, and since you want to pack and be off, that is what we will do, I suppose. He went out, too. Benet stood and thought a moment, then followed him, his little eyes very cunning. He caught him up in the doorway. Let us take a walk together, parvissimus, said he very affably. He thrust his arm through André-Louis and led him out into the street, where there was still considerable movement. Past the booths that ranged about the market they went, and down the hill towards a bridge. I don't think we shall pack tomorrow, said Benet presently. In fact, we shall play tomorrow night. Not if I know Polichinelle. You have... I am not thinking of Polichinelle. Of whom, then? Of yourself. I am flattered, sir. And in what capacity are you thinking of me? There was something too sleek and oily in Benet's voice for André-Louis' taste. I am thinking of you in the part of Scaramouche. Daydreams, said André-Louis. You are amusing yourself, of course. Not in the least. I am quite serious. But I am not an actor. You told me that you could be. Oh! Upon occasion. A small part, perhaps. Well, here is a big part. The chance to arrive at a single stride. How many men have had such a chance? It is a chance I do not covet. Benet, shall we change the subject? He was very frosty, as much perhaps because he scented in Benet's manner something that was vaguely menacing as for any other reason. We'll change the subject when I please, said Benet, allowing a glimpse of steel to glimmer through the silk of him. Tomorrow night you play Scaramouche. You are ready enough in your wits. Your figure is ideal, and you have just the kind of mordant humor for the part. You should be a great success. It is much more likely that I should be an egregious failure. That won't matter, said Benet, cynically, and explained himself. The failure will be personal to yourself. The receipts will be safe by then. Much obliged, said André-Louis. We should take 15 louis tomorrow night. It is unfortunate that you are without a Scaramouche, said André-Louis. It is fortunate that I have one parvissimus. André-Louis disengaged his arm. I begin to find you tiresome, said he. I think I will return. A moment, parvissimus. If I am to lose that 15 louis, you'll not take it amiss that I compensate myself in other ways? That is your own concern, Benet. Pardon, parvissimus. It may possibly be also yours. Benet took his arm again. Do me the kindness to step across the street with me, just as far as the post office there. I have something to show you. André-Louis went. Before they reached that sheet of paper nailed upon the door, he knew exactly what would say, and in effect it was, as he had supposed, that 20 louis would be paid for information leading to the apprehension of one André-Louis Moreau, lawyer of Gavrillac, who was wanted by the king's lieutenant and ran upon a charge of sedition. Benet watched him whilst he read. Their arms were linked, and Benet's grip was firm and powerful. Now, my friend, said he, will you be parvissimus and play Scaramouche tomorrow, or will you be André-Louis Moreau of Gavrillac and go to Rennes to satisfy the king's lieutenant? And if it should happen that you are mistaken, quoth André-Louis, his face a mask, I'll take the risk of that, leered Benet. You mentioned, I think, that you were a lawyer. An indiscretion, my dear. It is unlikely that two lawyers will be in hiding at the same time in the same district. You see, it is not really clever of me. Well, André-Louis Moreau, lawyer of Gavrillac, what is it to be? We will talk it over as we walk back, said André-Louis. What is there to talk over? One or two things, I think. I must know where I stand. Come, sir, if you please. Very well, said Benet, and they turned up the street again, but Benet maintained a firm hold of his young friend's arm, and kept himself on the alert for any tricks that the young gentleman might be disposed to play. It was an unnecessary precaution. André-Louis was not the man to waste his energy futilely. He knew that in bodily strength, he was no match at all for the heavy and powerful pantaloon. "If I yield to your most eloquent and seductive persuasions, Benet," said he sweetly, "what guarantee do you give me that you will not sell me for 20 louis after I shall have served your turn?" "You have my word of honor for that." Benet was emphatic. André-Louis laughed. "Oh, we are to talk of honor, are we? Really, Benet? It is clear you think me a fool." In the dark, he did not see the flush that leapt to Benet's round face. It was some moments before he replied. "Perhaps you are right," he growled. "What guarantee do you want?" "I do not know what guarantee you can possibly give. I have said that I will keep faith with you. Until you find it more profitable to sell me, you have it in your power to make it more profitable always for me to keep faith with you. It is due to you that we have done so well in Guichen. Oh, I admit it frankly." "In private," said André-Louis. Benet left the sarcasm unheeded. "What you have done for us here with Figaro Scaramouche, you can do elsewhere with other things. Naturally, I shall not want to lose you. That is your guarantee. Yet, tonight you would sell me for 20 louis. Because, name of God, you enrage me by refusing me a service well within your powers. Don't you think, had I been entirely the rogue you think me, I could have sold you on Saturday last? I want you to understand me, my dear Parvissimus. I beg that you'll not apologize. You would be more tiresome than ever. Of course you will be jibing. You never miss a chance to jibe. It'll bring you trouble before you're done with life. Come, here we are back at the inn, and you have not yet given me your decision." André-Louis looked at him. "I must yield, of course. I can't help myself." Benet released his arm at last, and slapped him heartily upon the back. "Well declared, my lad. You'll never regret it. If I know anything of the theater, I know that you have made the great decision of your life. Tomorrow night you'll thank me." André-Louis shrugged, and stepped out ahead toward the inn. "But Benet called him back. Parvissimus." He turned. There stood the man's great bulk, the moonlight beating down upon that round fat face of his. And he was holding out his hand. Parvissimus, no rancor. It is a thing I do not admit into my life. You will shake hands with me, and we will forget all this." André-Louis considered him a moment with disgust. He was growing angry. Then, realizing this, he conceived himself ridiculous, almost as ridiculous as that sly, scoundrelly pantaloon. He laughed and took the outstretched hand. "No rancor?" Benet insisted. "Oh, no rancor," said André-Louis. Chapter 5. Enter Scaramouche, dressed in the close-fitting suit of a bygone age, all black, from flat velvet cap to rosette shoes, his face whitened and a slight up-curled mustache glued to his upper lip, a small sword at his side, and a guitar slung behind him. Scaramouche surveyed himself in a mirror and was disposed to be sardonic, which was a proper move apart. He reflected that his life, which until lately had been of a stagnant, contemplative quality, had suddenly become excessively active. In the course of 1 week, he had been lawyer, mob orator, outlaw property man, and finally buffoon. Last Wednesday, he had been engaged in moving an audience of Rennes to anger. On this Wednesday, he was to move an audience of Guichen to mirth. Then he had been concerned to draw tears. Today it was his business to provoke laughter. There was a difference, and yet there was a parallel. Then as now he had been a comedian. And the part that he had played then was, when you came to think of it, akin to the part he was to play this evening. For what had he been at Rennes but a sort of Scaramouche, the little skirmisher, the astute intriguer, spattering the seat of trouble with a sly hand. The only difference lay in the fact that today he went forth under the name that properly described his type, whereas last week he had been disguised as a respectable young provincial attorney. He bowed to his reflection in the mirror. "Buffoon!" he apostrophized it. "At last you have found yourself. At last you have come into your heritage. You should be a great success." Hearing his new name called out by Benet, he went below to find the company assembled and waiting in the entrance corridor of the inn. He was, of course, an object of great interest to all the company. Most critically was he conned by Benet and Mademoiselle, by the former with gravely searching eyes, by the latter with a curl of scornful lip. "You'll do." Benet commended his makeup, At least you look the part. Unfortunately, men are not always what they look, said Clymene, acidly. That is a truth that does not at present apply to me, said André-Louis. For it is the first time in my life that I look what I am. Mademoiselle curled her lip a little further and turned her shoulder to him, but the others thought him very witty, probably because he was obscure. Columbine encouraged him with a friendly smile that displayed her large white teeth, and Benet swore yet once again that he would be a great success, since he threw himself with such spirit into the undertaking. Then, in a voice that for the moment he appeared to have borrowed from the roaring captain, Benet marshaled them for the short parade across to the market hall. The new Scaramouche fell into place beside Rhodomont. The old one, hobbling on a crutch, had departed an hour ago to take the place of doorkeeper, vacated of necessity by André-Louis, so that the exchange between those two was a complete one. Headed by Polichinelle banging his great drum and Pierrot blowing his trumpet, they set out, and were duly passed in review by the ragamuffins drawn up in files to enjoy so much of the spectacle as was to be obtained for nothing. 10 minutes later the 3 knocks sounded, and the curtains were drawn aside to reveal a battered set that was partly garden, partly forest, in which Clymene feverishly looked for the coming of Leandre. In the wings stood the beautiful, melancholy lover, awaiting his cue, and immediately behind him the unfledged Scaramouche, who was anon to follow him. André-Louis was assailed with nausea in that dread moment. He attempted to take a lightning mental review of the first act of the scenario of which he was himself the author-in-chief, but found his mind a complete blank. With the perspiration starting from his skin, he stepped back to the wall, where above a dim lantern was pasted a sheet bearing the brief outline of the piece. He was still studying it when his arm was clutched, and he was pulled violently towards the wings. He had a glimpse of Pantaloon's grotesque face, its eyes blazing, and he caught a raucous growl. Clymene has spoken your cue 3 times already. Before he realized it, he had been bundled onto the stage and stood there foolishly, blinking in the glare of the footlights with their tin reflectors. So utterly foolish and bewildered did he look that volley upon volley of laughter welcomed him from the audience, which this evening packed the hall from end to end. Trembling a little, his bewilderment at first increasing, he stood there to receive that rolling tribute to his absurdity. Clymene was eyeing him with expectant mockery, savoring in advance his humiliation. Leandre regarded him in consternation, whilst behind the scenes, Benet was dancing in fury. Name of a name, he groaned to the rather scared members of the company assembled there. What will happen when they discover that he isn't acting? But they never did discover it. Scaramouche's bewildered paralysis lasted but a few seconds. He realized that he was being laughed at, and remembered that his Scaramouche was a creature to be laughed with, and not at. He must save the situation, twist it to his own advantage as best he could. And now his real bewilderment and terror was succeeded by active bewilderment and terror far more marked, but not quite so funny. He contrived to make it clearly appear that his terror was of someone off the stage. He took cover behind a painted shrub, and thence, the laughter at last beginning to subside, he addressed himself to Clymene and Leandre. Forgive me, beautiful lady, if the abrupt manner of my entrance startled you. The truth is that I have never been the same since that last affair of mine with Almaviva. My heart is not what it used to be. Down there at the end of the lane, I came face to face with an elderly gentleman carrying a heavy cudgel, and the horrible thought entered my mind that it might be your father, and that our little stratagem to get you safely married might already have been betrayed to him. I think it was the cudgel put such notion in my head. Not that I am afraid. I am not really afraid of anything. But I could not help reflecting that, if it should really have been your father, and he had broken my head with his cudgel, your hopes would have perished with me. For without me, what should you have done, my poor children? A ripple of laughter from the audience had been steadily enheartening him, and helping him to recover his natural impudence. It was clear they found him comical. They were to find him far more comical than ever he had intended, and this was largely due to a fortuitous circumstance upon which he had insufficiently reckoned. The fear of recognition by someone from Gavrillac or Rennes had been strong upon him. His face was sufficiently made up to baffle recognition, but there remained his voice. To dissemble this, he had availed himself of the fact that Figaro was a Spaniard. He had known a Spaniard at Louis Le Grand who spoke a fluent but most extraordinary French, with a grotesque excess of sibilant sounds. It It was an accent that it often imitated. As youths will imitate characteristics that excite their mirth. Opportunely, he bethought him of that Spanish student, and it was upon his speech that tonight he modeled his own. The audience of Guechin found it as laughable on his lips as he and his fellows had found it formerly on the lips of that derided Spaniard. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Binet, listening to that glib impromptu of which the scenario gave no indication, had recovered from his fears. Dieu de Dieu, he whispered, grinning. Did he do it, then, on purpose? It seemed to him impossible that a man who had been so terror-stricken as he had fancied André-Louis could have recovered his wits so quickly and completely. Yet the doubt remained. To resolve it after the curtain had fallen upon a first act that had gone with a verve unrivaled until this hour in the annals of the company, borne almost entirely upon the slim shoulders of the new Scaramouche. Binet bluntly questioned him. They were standing in the space that did duty as green room, the company all assembled there, showering congratulations upon their new recruit, Scaramouche, a little exalted at the moment by his success, however trivial he might consider it to Moreau, took then a full revenge upon Clymene for the malicious satisfaction with which he had regarded his momentary blank terror. I do not wonder that you ask, said he. Faith, I should have warned you that I intended to do my best from the start to put the audience in a good humor with me. Mademoiselle very nearly ruined everything by refusing to reflect any of my terror. She was not even startled. Another time, mademoiselle, I shall give you full warning of my every intention. She crimsoned under her grease paint, but before she could find an answer of sufficient venom, her father was rating her soundly for her stupidity. The more soundly because himself he had been deceived by Scaramouche's supreme acting. Scaramouche's success in the first act was more than confirmed as the performance proceeded. Completely master of himself by now, and stimulated as only success can stimulate, he warmed to his work. Impudent, alert, sly, graceful, he incarnated the very ideal of Scaramouche, and he helped out his own native wit by many a remembered line from Beaumarchais, thereby persuading the better informed among the audience that here indeed was something of the real Figaro, and bringing them, as it were, into touch with the great world of the capital. When at last the curtain fell for the last time, it was Scaramouche who shared with Clymene the honors of the evening, his name that was coupled with hers in the calls that summoned them before the curtains. As they stepped back, and the curtain screened them again from the departing audience, Binet approached them, rubbing his fat hands softly together. This runagate young lawyer, whom chance had blown into his company, had evidently been sent by fate to make his fortune for him. The sudden success at Guechin, hitherto unrivaled, should be repeated and augmented elsewhere. There would be no more sleeping under hedges and tightening of belts. Adversity was behind him. He placed a hand upon Scaramouche's shoulder and surveyed him with a smile whose oiliness not even his red paint and colossal false nose could dissemble. "And what have you to say to me now?" he asked him. "Was I wrong when I assured you that you would succeed? Do you think I have followed my fortunes in theater for a lifetime without knowing a born actor when I see one? You are my discovery. Scaramouche, I have discovered you to yourself. I have set your feet upon the road to fame and fortune. I await your thanks." Scaramouche laughed at him, and his laugh was not altogether pleasant. "Always pantaloon," said he. The great countenance became overcast. "I see that you do not yet forgive me the little stratagem by which I force you to do justice to yourself. Ungrateful dog, as if I could have had any purpose but to make you, and I have done so. Continue as you have begun, and you will end in Paris. You may yet tread the stage of the Comédie Française, the rival of Talma, Fleury, and Dugazon. When that happens to you, perhaps you will feel the gratitude that is due to old Binet, for you will owe it all to this soft-hearted old fool." "If you were as good an actor on the stage as you are in private," said Scaramouche, "you would yourself have won to the Comédie Française long since. But I bear no rancor, Binet." He laughed and put out his hand. Binet fell upon it and wrung it heartily. "That, at least, is something," he declared. "My boy, I have great plans for you, for us. Tomorrow we go to Moore. There's a fair there to the end of this week. Then on Monday we take our chances at Pipriac, and after that we must consider. It may be that I am about to realize the dream of my life. There must have been upwards of 15 louis taken tonight. Where the devil is that rascal Courtemet?" Courtemet was the name of the original Scaramouche, who had so unfortunately twisted his ankle That Benet should refer to him by his secular designation was a sign that in the Benet company, at least, he had fallen forever from the lofty eminence of Scaramouche. Let us go and find him, and then we'll away to the inn and crack a bottle of the best Burgundy. Perhaps 2 bottles. But Courtemay was not readily to be found. None of the company had seen him since the close of the performance. Benet went round to the entrance. Courtemay was not there. At first he was annoyed. Then, as he continued in vain to bawl the fellow's name, he began to grow uneasy. Lastly, when Polichinelle, who was with them, discovered Courtemay crutch standing discarded behind the door, Benet became alarmed. A dreadful suspicion entered his mind. He grew visibly pale under his paint. "But this evening he couldn't walk without the crutch," he exclaimed. "How then does he come to leave it there and take himself off?" "Perhaps he has gone on to the inn," suggested someone. "But he couldn't walk without his crutch," Benet insisted. Nevertheless, since clearly he was not anywhere about the market hall, to the inn they all trooped and deafened the landlady with their inquiries. "Oh, yes, Courtemay came in some time ago." "Where is he now?" "He went away again at once. He just came for his bag." For his bag? Benet was on the point of an apoplexy. How long ago was that? She glanced at the timepiece on the overmantel. It would be about half an hour ago. It was a few minutes before the Wren diligence passed through. The Wren diligence. Benet was almost inarticulate. Could he walk?" he asked, on a note of terrible anxiety. "Walk? He ran like a hare when he left the inn. I thought myself that his agility was suspicious, seeing how lame he had been since he fell downstairs yesterday. Is anything wrong?" Benet had collapsed into a chair. He took his head in his hands and groaned. "The scoundrel was shamming all the time," exclaimed Clymene. "His fall downstairs was a trick. He was playing for this. He has swindled us." 15 louis at least, perhaps 16, said Benet. "Oh, the heartless blackguard, to swindle me who had been as a father to him, and to swindle me in such a moment." From the ranks of the silent, awe-stricken company, each member which was wondering by how much of the loss his own meager pay would be mulcted, there came a splutter of laughter. Benet glared with blood-injected eyes. "Who laughs?" he roared. "What heartless wretch has the audacity to laugh at my misfortune?" André-Louis, still in the sable glories of Scaramouche, stood forward. He was laughing still. "It is you, is it? You may laugh on another note, my friend, if I choose a way to recoup myself that I know of." "Dullard." Scaramouche scorned him. "Rabbit-brained elephant. What if Courtemay has gone with 15 louis? Hasn't he left you something worth 20 times as much?" Benet gaped uncomprehending. "You are between 2 wines, I think. You've been drinking," he concluded. "So I have, at the fountain of Talia. Oh, don't you see? Don't you see the treasure that Courtemay has left behind him?" "What has he left?" "A unique idea for the groundwork of a scenario. It unfolds itself all before me. I'll borrow part of the title from Molière. We'll call it Les Fourberies de Scaramouche. And if we don't leave the audiences a Moor and Pipriac with sides aching from laughter, I'll play the dullard pantaloon in future." Polichinelle smacked fist into palm. "Superb," he said fiercely. "To cull fortune from misfortune, to turn loss into profit, that is to have genius." Scaramouche made a leg. "Polichinelle, you are a fellow after my own heart. I love a man who can discern my merit. If Pantaloon had half your wit, we should have Burgundy tonight in spite of the flight of Courtemay." "Burgundy?" roared Benet, and before he could get farther Harlequin had clapped his hands together. "That is the spirit, Benet. You heard him, landlady. He called for Burgundy. I call for nothing of the kind." "But you heard him, dear madam. We all heard him." The others made chorus, while Scaramouche smiled at him and patted his shoulder. "Up, man, a little courage. Did you not say that fortune awaits us? And have we not now the wherewithal to constrain fortune? Burgundy, then, to toast Les Fourberies de Scaramouche." And Benet, who was not blind to the force of the idea, yielded, took courage, and got drunk with the rest. Chapter 6. Clymene. Diligent search among the many scenarios of the improvisers which have survived their day has failed to bring to light the scenario of Les Forbry's de Scaramouche, upon which we are told the fortunes of an troupe came to be soundly established. They played it for the first time at Moore in the following week with André-Louis, who was known by now as Scaramouche to all the company and to the public alike, in the title role. If he had acquitted himself well as Figaro's Scaramouche, he excelled himself in the new piece, the scenario which would appear to be very much the better of the two. After Moore came Pipriac, where 4 performances were given, 2 of each of the scenarios that now formed the backbone of the Binet repertoire. In both, Scaramouche, who was beginning to find himself, materially improved his performances. So smoothly now did the 2 pieces run that Scaramouche actually suggested to Binet that after Fougere, which they were to visit in the following week, they should tempt fortune in a real theater in the important town of Redon. The notion terrified Binet at first, but coming to think of it, and his ambition being fanned by André-Louis, he ended by allowing himself to succumb to the temptation. It seemed to André-Louis in those days that he had found his real métier, and not only was he beginning to like it, but actually looked forward to a career as actor-author that might indeed lead him in the end to that mecca of all comedians, the Comédie Française. And there were other possibilities. From the writing of skeleton scenarios for improvisers, he might presently pass to writing plays of dialogue, plays in the proper sense of the word, after the manner of Chenier, Eglantine, and Beaumarchais. The fact that he dreamed such dreams shows us how very kindly he had taken the profession into which Chance and Binet between them had conspired to thrust him. That he had real talent both as author and as actor I do not doubt, and I am persuaded that had things fallen out differently, he would have won for himself a lasting place among French dramatists, and thus fully have realized that dream of his. Now, dream though it was, he did not neglect the practical side of it. You realize, he told Binet, that I have it in my power to make your fortune for you. He and Binet were sitting alone together in the parlor of the inn at Pipriac, drinking a very excellent bottle of Volney. It was on the night after the 4th and last performance there of Les Forbry's. The business in Pipriac had been as excellent as in Moore and Guéchin. You will have gathered this in the fact that they drank Volney. I will concede it, my dear Scaramouche, so that I may hear the sequel. I am disposed to exercise this power if the inducement is sufficient. You will realize that for 15 livres a month a man does not sell such exceptional gifts as mine. There is an alternative, said Binet darkly. There is no alternative. Don't be a fool, Binet. Binet sat up as if he had been prodded. Members of his company did not take this tone of direct rebuke with him. Anyway, I make you a present of it. Scaramouche pursued airily. Exercise it, if you please. Step outside and inform the police that they can lay hands upon one André-Louis Moreau. But that will be the end of your fine dreams of going to Redon, and for the first time in your life playing in a real theater. Without me, you can't do it, and you know it. And I am not going to Redon or anywhere else. In fact, I am not even going to Fougere until we have an equitable arrangement. But what heat, complained Binet. And all for what? Why must you assume that I have the soul of a usurer? When our little arrangement was made, I had no idea, how could I, that you would prove as valuable to me as you are. You had but to remind me, my dear Scaramouche, I am a just man. As from today, you shall have 30 livres a month. See, I double it at once. I am a generous man. But you are not ambitious. Now listen to me a moment. And he proceeded to unfold a scheme that filled Binet with a paralyzing terror. After Redon, Nantes, he said. Nantes and the Theatre Feydeau. Binet choked in the act of drinking. The Theatre Feydeau was a sort of provincial Comédie Française. The great Fleury had played there to an audience as critical as any in France. The very thought of Redon, cherished as it had come to be by Binet, gave him at moments a cramp in the stomach. So dangerously ambitious did it seem to him. And Redon was a puppet show by comparison with Nantes. Yet this raw lad whom he had picked up by chance 3 weeks ago, and who in that time had blossomed from a country attorney into author and actor, could talk of Nantes and the Theatre Feydeau without changing color. But why not Paris and the Comédie Française? Wondered Binet with sarcasm, when at last he had got his breath. That may come later, says Impudence. You've been drinking, my friend. But André-Louis detailed a plan that had been forming in his mind. Fudgeret should be a training ground for Redon, and Redon should be a training ground for Nantes. They would stay in Redon as long as Redon would pay adequately to come and see them, working hard to perfect themselves the while. They would add 3 or 4 new players of talent to the company. He would write 3 or 4 fresh scenarios, and these should be tested and perfected until the troupe was in possession of at least half a dozen plays upon which they could depend. They would lay out a portion of their profits on better dresses and better scenery. And finally, in a couple of months' time, if all went well, they should be ready to make their real bid for fortune at Nantes. It was quite true that distinction was usually demanded of the companies appearing at the Fade-All. But on the other hand, Nantes had not seen a troupe of improvisers for a generation and longer. They would be supplying a novelty to which all Nantes should flock provided that the work were really well done, and Scaramouche undertook. Pledged himself that if matters were left in his own hands, his projected revival of the Commedia dell'arte in all its glories would exceed whatever expectations the public of Nantes might bring to the theater. "We'll talk of Paris after Nantes," he finished, supremely matter-of-fact. "Just as we will definitely decide on Nantes after Redon." The persuasiveness that could sway a mob ended by sweeping him. Binet off his feet, the prospect which Scaramouche unfolded, if terrifying, was also intoxicating, and as Scaramouche delivered a crushing answer to each weakening objection in a measure as it was advanced, Binet ended by promising to think the matter over. "Redon will point the way," said André-Louis, "and I don't doubt which way Redon will point." Thus the great adventure of Redon dwindled to insignificance. Instead of a terrifying undertaking in itself, it became merely a rehearsal for something greater. In his momentary exaltation, Binet proposed another bottle of Volney. Scaramouche waited until the cork was drawn before he continued. "The thing remains possible," said he then, holding his glass to the light, and speaking casually, "as long as I am with you." "Agreed, my dear Scaramouche, agreed. Our chance meeting was a fortunate thing for both of us." "For both of us," said Scaramouche with stress. "That is as I would have it, so that I do not think you will surrender me just yet to the police. As if I could think of such a thing. My dear Scaramouche, you amuse yourself. I beg that you will never allude to that little joke of mine again." "It is forgotten," said André-Louis. "And now for the remainder of my proposal. If I am to become the architect of your fortunes, if I am to build them as I have planned them, I must also and in the same degree become the architect of my own." "In the same degree?" Binet frowned. "In the same degree. From today, if you please, we will conduct the affairs of this company in a proper manner, and we will keep account books." "I am an artist," said Binet with pride. "I am not a merchant. There is a business side to your art, and that shall be conducted in the business manner. I have thought it all out for you. You shall not be troubled with details that might hinder the due exercise of your art. All that you have to do is to say yes or no to my proposal." "Ah, and the proposal is that you constitute me your partner, with an equal share in the profits of your company." Pantaloon's great countenance grew pale. His little eyes widened to their fullest extent as he conned the face of his companion. Then he exploded. "You are mad, of course, to make me a proposal so monstrous. It has its injustices, I admit, but I have provided for them. It would not, for instance, be fair that in addition to all that I am proposing to do for you, I should also play Scaramouche and write your scenarios without any reward outside of the half profit, which would come to me as a partner. Thus, before the profits come to be divided, there is a salary to be paid me as actor and a small sum for each scenario with which I provide the company. That is a matter for mutual agreement. Similarly, you shall be paid a salary as Pantaloon. After those expenses are cleared up, as well as all the other salaries and disbursements, the residue is the profit to be divided equally between us." It was not, as you can imagine, a proposal that Binet would swallow at a draught. He began with a point-blank refusal to consider it. "In that case, my friend," said Scaramouche, "we part company at once. Tomorrow I shall bid you a reluctant farewell." Binet fell to raging. He spoke of ingratitude in feeling terms. He even permitted himself another sly allusion to that little jest of his concerning the police, which he had promised never again to mention. "As to that, you may do as you please. Play the informer, by all means, but consider that you will just as definitely be deprived of my services, and that without me you are nothing, as you were before I joined your company. M. Benet did not care what the consequences might be. A fig for the consequences. He would teach this impudent young country attorney that M. Benet was not the man to be imposed upon. Scaramouche rose. Very well, said he, between indifference and resignation. As you wish. But before you act, sleep on the matter. In the cold light of morning, you may see our two proposals in their proper proportions. Mine spells fortune for both of us. Yours spells ruin for both of us. Good night, M. Benet. Heaven help you to a wise decision. The decision to which M. Benet finally came was, naturally, the only one possible in the face of so firm a resolve as that of André-Louis, who held the trumps. Of course, there were further discussions before all was settled, and M. Benet was brought to an agreement only after an infinity of haggling surprising in one who was an artist and not a man of business. 1 or 2 concessions were made by André-Louis. He consented, for instance, to waive his claim to be paid for scenarios, and he also consented that M. Benet should appoint himself a salary that was out of all proportion to his deserts. Thus, in the end, the matter was settled, and the announcement duly made to the assembled company. There were, of course, jealousies and resentments, but these were not deep-seated, and they were readily swallowed when it was discovered that under the new arrangement the lot of the entire company was to be materially improved from a point of view of salaries. This was a matter that had met with considerable opposition from M. Benet, but the irresistible Scaramouche swept away all objections. If we are to play at the fade-off, you want a company of self-respecting comedians and not a pack of cringing starvelings. The better we pay them in reason, the more they will earn for us. Thus was conquered the company's resentment of this too swift promotion of its latest recruit, cheerfully now, with one exception. They accepted the dominance of Scaramouche, a dominance soon to be so firmly established that M. Benet himself came under it. The one exception was Clymene. Her failure to bring to heel this interesting young stranger, who had almost literally dropped into their midst that morning outside Gretchen, had begotten in her malice which his persistent ignoring of her had been steadily inflaming. She had remonstrated with her father when the new partnership was first formed. She had lost her temper with him and called him a fool, whereupon M. Benet, in Pantaloon's best manner, had lost his temper in his turn and boxed her ears. She piled it up to the account of Scaramouche, and spied her opportunity to pay off some of that ever-increasing score. But opportunities were few. Scaramouche was too occupied just then. During the week of preparation at Foudre, he was hardly seen save at the performances, whilst when once they were at Redon, he came and went like the wind between the theater and the inn. The Redon experiment had justified itself from the first. Stimulated and encouraged by this, André-Louis worked day and night during the month that they spent in that busy little town. The moment had been well chosen, for the trade in chestnuts of which Redon is the center was just then at its height, and every afternoon the little theater was packed with spectators. The fame of the troupe had gone forth, borne by the chestnut growers of the district, who were bringing their wares to Redon Market, and the audiences were made up of people from the surrounding country, and from neighboring villages as far out as Allaire, Saint-Périeur, and St. Nicholas. To keep the business from slackening, André-Louis prepared a new scenario every week. He wrote 3 in addition to those 2 which he had already supplied the company. These were The Marriage of Pantaloon, The Shy Lover, and The Terrible Captain. Of these, the last was the greatest success. It was based upon the Miles Gloriosus of Plautus, with great opportunities for Rhodomont, and a good part for Scaramouche as the roaring Captain Sly Lieutenant. Its success was largely due to the fact that André-Louis amplified the scenario to the extent of indicating very fully in places the lines which the dialogue should follow, whilst here and there he had gone so far as to supply some of the actual dialogue to be spoken, without, however, making it obligatory upon the actors to keep to the letter of it. And meanwhile, as the business prospered, he became busy with tailors, improving the wardrobe of the company, which was sorely in need of improvement. He ran to earth a couple of needy artists, lured them into the company to play small parts, apothecaries and notaries, and set them to beguile their leisure in painting new scenery, so as to be ready for what he called the conquest of Nantes, which was to come in the new year. Never in his life had he worked so hard. Never in his life had he worked at all by comparison with his activities now. His fund of energy and enthusiasm was inexhaustible, like that of his good humor. He came and went, acted, wrote, conceived, directed, planned, and executed. What time, M? Benet took his ease at last in comparative affluence, drank Burgundy every night, ate white bread and other delicacies, and began to congratulate himself upon his astuteness in having made this industrious, tireless fellow his partner. Having discovered how idle had been his fears of performing at Redon, he now began to dismiss the terrors with which the notion of nonce had haunted him, and his happiness was reflected throughout the ranks of his company, with the single exception always of Clymene. She had ceased to sneer at Scaramouche, having realized at last that her sneers left him untouched and recoiled upon herself. Thus her almost indefinable resentment of him was increased by being stifled, until at all costs an outlet for it must be found. One day she threw herself in his way as he was leaving the theater after performance. The others had already gone, and she had returned upon pretense of having forgotten something. "Will you tell me what I have done to you?" she asked him, point blank. "Done to me, mademoiselle?" He did not understand. She made a gesture of impatience. "Why do you hate me?" "Hate you, mademoiselle? I do not hate anybody. It is the most stupid of all the emotions. I have never hated, not even my enemies. What Christian resignation! As for hating you of all people, why, I consider you adorable. I envy Leandre every day of my life. I have seriously thought of setting him to play Scaramouche and playing lovers myself. I don't think he would be a success," said she. "That is the only consideration that restrains me. And yet, given the inspiration that is given Leandre, it is possible that I might be convincing." "Why? What inspiration do you mean?" "The inspiration of playing to so adorable a Clymene." Her lazy eyes were now alert to search that lean face of his. "You are laughing at me," said she, and swept past him into the theater on her pretended quest. There was nothing to be done with such a fellow. He was utterly without feeling. He was not a man at all. Yet when she came forth again at the end of some 5 minutes, she found him still lingering at the door. "Not gone yet?" she asked him, superciliously. "I was waiting for you, mademoiselle. You will be walking to the inn. If I might escort you... But what gallantry! What condescension! Perhaps you prefer that I did not?" "How could I prefer that, M. Scaramouche? Besides, we're both going the same way, and the streets are common to all. It is that I am overwhelmed by the unusual honor." He looked into her piquant little face, and noted how obscured it was by its cloud of dignity. He laughed. "Perhaps I fear that the honor was not sought." "Ah, now I understand," she cried. "It is for me to seek these honors. I am to woo a man before he will pay me the homage of civility. It must be so, since you, who clearly know everything, have said so. It remains for me to beg your pardon for my ignorance." "It amuses you to be cruel," said Scaramouche. "No matter. Shall we walk?" They set out together, stepping briskly to warm their blood against the wintry evening air. A while they went in silence, yet each furtively observing the other. "And so you find me cruel?" she challenged him at length, thereby betraying the fact that the accusation had struck home. He looked at her with a half-smile. "Will you deny it? You are the first man that ever accused me of that. I dare not suppose myself the first man to whom you have been cruel. That were an assumption too flattering to myself. I must prefer to think that the others suffered in silence." "Mon Dieu, have you suffered?" She was between seriousness and raillery. "I placed a confession as an offering on the altar of your vanity. I should never have suspected it." "How could you? Am I not what your father calls a natural actor? I was an actor long before I became Scaramouche. Therefore I have laughed. I often do when I am hurt. When you were pleased to be disdainful, I acted disdain in my turn." "You acted very well," said she, without reflecting. "Of course. I am an excellent actor. And why this sudden change?" "In response to the change in you. You have grown weary of your part of cruel madam. A dull part, believe me, and unworthy of your talents. Were I a woman, and had I your loveliness and your grace, Clymene, I should disdain to use them as weapons of offense." "Loveliness and grace," she echoed, feigning amused surprise. "But the vain baggage was mollified. When was it that you discovered this beauty and this grace, M. Scaramouche?" He looked at her a moment, considering the sprightly beauty of her, the adorable femininity that from the first had so irresistibly attracted him. One morning when I beheld you rehearsing a love scene with Leandre, he caught the surprise that leapt to her eyes, before she veiled them under drooping lids from his too questing gaze. Why, that was the first time you saw me. I had no earlier occasion to remark your charms. You asked me to believe too much, said she, but her tone was softer than he had ever known it yet. Then you'll refuse to believe me if I confess that it was this grace and beauty that determined my destiny that day by urging me to join your father's troupe. At that she became a little out of breath. There was no longer any question of finding an outlet for resentment. Resentment was all forgotten. But why? With what object? With the object of asking you one day to be my wife. She halted under the shock of that and swung round to face him. Her glance met his own without shyness now. There was a hardening glitter in her eyes, a faint stir of color in her cheeks. She suspected him of an unpardonable mockery. You go very fast, don't you? She asked him, with heat. I do. Haven't you observed it? I am a man of sudden impulses. See what I have made of the Benet troupe in less than a couple of months. Another might have labored for a year and not achieved the half of it. Shall I be slower in love than in work? Would it be reasonable to expect it? I have curbed and repressed myself not to scare you by precipitancy, in that I have done violence to my feelings, and more than all in using the same cold aloofness with which you chose to treat me. I have waited, so patiently, until you should tire of that mood of cruelty. You are an amazing man, said she, quite colorlessly. I am, he agreed with her. It is only the conviction that I am not commonplace that has permitted me to hope as I have hoped. Mechanically, and as if by tacit consent, they resumed their walk. And I ask you to observe, he said, when you complain that I go very fast, that, after all, I have so far asked you for nothing. How? Quoth she, frowning. I have merely told you my hopes. I am not so rash as to ask at once whether I may realize them. My faith, but that is prudent, said she tartly. Of course. It was his self-possession that exasperated her, for after that she walked the short remainder of the way in silence. And so, for the moment, the matter was left just there. But that night, after they had supped, it chanced that when Clymene was about to retire, he and she were alone together in a room above stairs that her father kept exclusively for his company. The Benet troupe, you see, was rising in the world. As Clymene now rose to withdraw for the night, Scaramouche rose with her to light her candle. Holding it in her left hand, she offered him her right, a long, tapering, white hand at the end of a softly rounded arm that was bare to the elbow. Good night, Scaramouche, she said, but so softly, so tenderly, that he caught his breath, and stood conning her, his dark eyes aglow. Thus a moment. Then he took the tips of her fingers in his grasp, and bowing over the hand, pressed his lips upon it. Then he looked at her again. The intense femininity of her lured him on, invited him, surrendered to him. Her face was pale. There was a glitter in her eyes, a curious smile upon her parted lips, and under its feciment her bosom rose and fell to complete the betrayal of her. By the hand he continued to hold. He drew her towards him. She came unresisting. He took the candle from her and set it down on the sideboard by which she stood. The next moment her slight, lithe body was in his arms, and he was kissing her, murmuring her name as if it were a prayer. Am I cruel now? She asked him, panting. He kissed her again for only answer. You made me cruel because you would not see, she told him next in a whisper. And then the door opened, and Benet came in to have his paternal eyes regaled by this highly indecorous behavior of his daughter. He stood at gaze, whilst they quite leisurely, and in a self-possession too complete to be natural, detached each from the other. And what may be the meaning of this? Demanded Benet, bewildered and profoundly shocked. Does it require explaining? Asked Scaramouche. Doesn't it speak for itself eloquently? It means that Clymene and I have taken it into our heads to be married. And doesn't it matter what I may take into my head? Of course. But you could have neither the bad taste nor the bad heart to offer any obstacle. You take that for granted? Aye. That is your way, to be sure, to take things for granted. But my daughter is not to be taken for granted. I have very definite views for my daughter. You have done an unworthy thing, Scaramouche, you have betrayed my trust in you. I am very angry with you." He rolled forward with his ponderous yet curiously noiseless gait. Scaramouche turned to her, smiling, and handed her the candle. "If you will leave us, Clymene, I will ask your hand of your father in proper form." She vanished, a little fluttered, lovelier than ever in her mixture of confusion and timidity. Scaramouche closed the door and faced the enraged Benet, who had flung himself into an armchair at the head of the short table, faced him with the avowed purpose of asking for Clymene's hand in proper form. And this was how he did it. "Father-in-law," said he, "I congratulate you. This will certainly mean the comedy française for Clymene, and that before long, and you shall shine in the glory she will reflect. As the father of Madame Scaramouche, you may yet be famous." Benet, his face slowly empurpling, glared at him in speechless stupefaction. His rage was the more utter from his humiliating conviction that whatever he might say or do, this irresistible fellow would bend him to his will. At last speech came to him. "You're a damn corsair," he cried, thickly, banging his ham-like fist upon the table. "A corsair? First you sail in and plunder me of half my legitimate gains, and now you want to carry off my daughter. But I'll be damned if I'll give her to a graceless, nameless scoundrel like you, for whom the gallows are waiting already." Scaramouche pulled the bell rope, not at all discomposed. He smiled. There was a flush on his cheeks and a gleam in his eyes. He was very pleased with the world that night. He really owed a great debt to de Lesdiguières. "Benet," said he, "forget for once that you are Pantaloon, and behave as a nice, amiable father-in-law should behave when he has secured a son-in-law of exceptionable merits. We are going to have a bottle of Burgundy at my expense, and it shall be the best bottle of Burgundy to be found in Redon. Compose yourself to do fitting honor to it. Excitations of the bile invariably impair the fine sensitiveness of the palate.